Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. High in the Colorado mountains, a retired military architect begins building his dream fortress, only to trigger a ruthless war with a power-hungry HOA he doesn't even belong to. They forged documents, he built defenses, now it's war, and they picked the wrong man to fight. It started like most good stories do, with fresh coffee, blueprints rolled out on a sawhorse, and the sound of nail guns echoing through pine-covered slopes. We were putting in the subfloor for the third level of the house, my house, on a plot of land that I had fought tooth and nail to get. 2.5 acres of pure, legally untethered freedom perched on the edge of a Colorado ridge, with nothing but mule deer, ponderosa pines, and God as my neighbors. Or so I thought. Let me back up. My name's Daniel Vaughn, 42 years old, retired military architect, spent 15 years designing modular outposts for places where the words municipal code would get you laughed off the map. After I cashed in my pension, I didn't want a ranch house with beige siding in a HOA-governed suburb. I wanted elevation, view, silence. I wanted a fortress that would make suburban Karens weep. So, when I found this former Forest Service parcel, raw, wild, unclaimed by the creeping tentacles of planned communities, I bought it outright, got every permit from the county, even sat through their god-awful PowerPoint on building responsibly in post-wildfire zones. Hired a good team. Drew up the plans myself. 3-story glass and timber modern chalet, open-view living room on the top floor, because if you're going to wake up in the mountains, you damn well better see them. Construction was humming along. Crew was solid. Weather mild for October. I was halfway through double-checking the rebar schedule when I heard tires crunch gravel up near the temporary gate. I looked up. Black SUV, clean, oversized, moving like it owned the place. It creaked to a stop, and 3 people stepped out like an HOA-themed clown car. Middle-aged man with mirrored sunglasses, blonde woman in heels, clipboard clutched like a weapon, and behind them, another guy in a branded windbreaker. But it was the woman who walked like she was about to audit your soul. "Can I help you?" I asked, already knowing I wasn't going to like the answer. She didn't bother with introductions, didn't look at the plans, didn't ask who I was. She looked at the third floor framing like it had spit in her Chardonnay. "This structure is in violation," she said. "Of what?" "Suncrest Ridge Estates Architectural Code. No structure shall exceed 2 stories above grade." I stared, blinked, then smiled. I'd met her kind before, usually behind a desk labeled compliance officer or neighborhood harmony director. They all had the same resting lawsuit face. "You're from the HOA," I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. "Karen Lancaster, president. This property is within visual proximity of the community and falls under our view corridor regulations." That last part made me choke on my own tongue. View corridor? What? Structures that disrupt the natural aesthetic, visible from within the community bounds, are subject to our oversight. I reached into my weather-beaten folder, pulled out a laminated copy of my official parcel map, and pointed to the thick, bold line that stopped well below my property. "You see that?" I said. "That's your jurisdiction, and this," I tapped my finger on my lot, "is not it." Karen didn't even flinch. "That's a technicality. If your structure impacts our property values or the visual integrity of Suncrest Ridge, then our community has standing." Standing. Hell of a word. Usually reserved for courts, not people in loafers trespassing on active construction zones. My land is private, outside your association. I have permits. I have zoning. I have legal right to build what I damn well please, within county code, not your backyard book club charter. Her eyes narrowed. She clicked her pen and started scribbling something on her clipboard. "We'll be filing a formal complaint. If you continue framing the 3rd level, we'll seek a stop order from the county." "Please do," I said, dead calm now. "But next time you come up here uninvited, bring a warrant. Or a priest." Karen turned on her heel. The other 2 followed like silent henchmen. They didn't look back as they drove off, but the SUV's tinted windows reflected just enough sunlight to burn a hole in my good mood. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the alpine air. A man builds a home expecting to fight wind, snow, maybe a black bear or 2. He doesn't expect to go to war with a goddamn HOA he's not even part of. But this wasn't over. That woman didn't come up here just to chat. That was a warning shot. And I'd spent a career studying how people lay siege to things. They just picked the wrong fortress. 3 days after the Karen convoy tried to roll over my sanity, I got a letter in the mail. Not certified, not legal, just a glossy envelope with a gold Suncrest Ridge Estates logo embossed like it was a wedding invitation. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No salutation, no pleasantries. Just an official notice demanding I deconstruct the third floor within 10 days or face enforcement action through appropriate legal channels. Whatever the hell that meant. I read it twice. Then laughed so hard I dropped my coffee on the gravel. The arrogance was practically radiating off the page. I wasn't even in their HOA, but here they were trying to find me like I'd painted my house neon pink in their cul-de-sac. I scanned the document and sent it straight to my attorney, Mark LaRoche, a bulldog with a silver tongue and a spine made of rebar. 20 minutes later, he called back. "They're out of their minds," he said. "But let's make sure they didn't sneak something past zoning while you were busy building a house." Mark submitted a formal request to the County Land Records Office just to verify that my property hadn't somehow been annexed by HOA black magic. A few days later, I got the email. Subject line, "You're gonna want to sit down." Attached was a scanned copy of an application submitted by the HOA 2 weeks prior, a formal petition to expand their jurisdiction uphill, listing several parcels they claimed as voluntarily included into the association. And guess whose lot was highlighted dead center? Mine. But that wasn't even the punch in the gut. The real kicker was the attached owner consent form, bearing my full name, lot number, and a shockingly decent imitation of my signature. It looked close. Damn close. If I didn't know better, I'd think I'd signed it myself after a few drinks. But the date? It was backdated by nearly a month before Karen had ever shown up. They forged it. Some sociopathic HOA office ghoul had actually committed felony forgery, filed it with the county, and probably went home thinking they were a hero for protecting lawn uniformity. I felt a familiar twinge at the base of my skull, the same one I used to get in combat zones right before something blew up. Mark wasn't laughing this time. "We're going to file a fraud complaint and initiate a rollback of the annexation. But this isn't some clerical error, Daniel. This is premeditated. Someone inside that HOA knew what they were doing." While he got the legal gears turning, I called my land use consultant, Erin, a sharp-as-a-tack redhead who used to work in the county mapping office. She cross-checked the digital GIS system and confirmed that yes, my parcel had been temporarily flagged as under HOA review. Not legally incorporated yet, but on a dangerous path. That same night, I drove down to the community board office and requested a public inspection of all annexation applications. The clerk didn't even blink. She handed over a binder and went back to pretending she wasn't complicit. Inside were copies of all consent forms from the past 3 months. 5 new parcels added, 5 identical signature sheets, all perfectly spaced, identical handwriting in the address fields. Copy, paste, forge, submit. I took photos of every single page and forwarded them to Mark. While all this was unfolding, the HOA began acting like they'd already won. A glossy flyer was taped to my temporary gatepost the next morning. "Attention residents! The Suncrest Ridge community is proud to announce our jurisdictional expansion to preserve the beauty of the ridge. All properties above the tree line are now part of the HOA family. Welcome." They included a render of their little kingdom growing like a tumor up the slope, my house placed squarely in the middle, labeled Lot 53. They even put balloons on it. I was stunned. It wasn't just shady. It was cult behavior. But that wasn't what pissed me off the most. What really boiled my blood was that they thought I'd roll over, like I'd be too busy hanging drywall to notice someone just tried to wrap a collar around my land and tighten it. No, not a chance. That night, I walked the perimeter of my property with a flashlight in one hand and a cold beer in the other. Then I planted new signs, real official ones with laminated county maps and permit numbers. Private property. Not subject to HOA jurisdiction. Trespassers will be recorded. The next morning, I added trail cameras, motion-activated, infrared, with cloud backups. I wasn't just building a house now. I was building a defensible position. And I knew damn well the next move was theirs. But I also knew something else. They just committed a crime. They didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just a zoning spat anymore. This was war. 3 days after the forged consent bombshell dropped, we were back on site, trying to finish sheathing the third floor exterior. Snow hadn't hit yet, but clouds were threatening. I needed to seal the place up before the weather turned the job into a six-figure ice sculpture. The crew was working fast, fueled by cheap gas station burritos and the kind of defiance you get when your boss tells you the enemy might be watching. Spirits were high until a white pickup truck pulled into the gravel path, the county seal stenciled on the door. Building inspector. The man who stepped out was tall, mid-50s, and wearing the kind of official-looking windbreaker that usually precedes bad news. He held a clipboard like it was a weapon of passive-aggressive destruction. "You Daniel Vaughn?" he asked. "Depends," I said. "You bring in pizza or bad news?" He didn't laugh. "I'm here to deliver a notice of temporary work suspension under County Code 9114. He handed me the paper. A big red stop watermark glared at me from the top like an angry toddler. "Based on what?" I asked, already knowing I wasn't going to like the answer. "There's an active jurisdictional review in progress. A community association submitted a claim that your property is under pending governance consideration." I stared at him. "You mean the HOA I'm not a part of?" He cleared his throat. "Until that's legally clarified, we've been instructed to suspend construction to avoid potential code conflicts." I wanted to laugh. I really did, but there was a weight in my chest, pressing hard. The county, my county, had just paused my build based on forged documents and a Karen with a clipboard. "Let me guess," I said. "They filed a complaint?" He nodded. "Suncrest Ridge Estates. Something about exceeding 2 floors and violating view corridor integrity." There it was again. The mythical view corridor, the fairy tale where aesthetics trump property rights. I asked him if he'd seen my permits. He glanced down. "Yes, the structure complies with county code as issued, but you're shutting me down anyway." He didn't answer. I called Mark as soon as the inspector left. His voice was pure gravel. "They're playing dirty. This isn't legal. It's political. Someone in the county wants to avoid a lawsuit from the HOA, so they're hedging their bets by screwing you first." Fantastic. That same afternoon, a new twist dropped into the clown fire. The HOA had launched a citizen-led beautification initiative. A press release appeared on their website, calling it the Suncrest Ridge Vision Group, an independent volunteer coalition focused on preserving ridgetop harmony through community-led dialogue and non-binding visual guidance. Translation: they were forming a mob with clipboards. I scrolled through their manifesto. It was full of pastel graphics and buzzwords like view preservation zones, communal sightline wellness, and, my personal favorite, voluntary architectural sensitivity. They even had a mission statement. "We believe that what we see affects how we live. One jarring rooftop can ripple through a neighborhood like a wound. We are the eyes of the ridge." I nearly spit coffee across my laptop. Next thing I knew, they were holding community walkthroughs, strolling up and down the public road near my property, squinting at my house through binoculars like birdwatchers studying an invasive species. They posted photos in their group, blurred my license plate, and wrote captions like, "We hope Daniel chooses to be part of the solution. There's still time to bring the structure into harmony with the slope." I didn't know whether to laugh, scream, or design a middle finger-shaped roof ornament, but the cherry on the sundae came the next morning. I arrived to find my lead framer Greg standing by the stack of exterior cladding, arms crossed, face pale. "You're not going to believe this," he said, pointing to the insulation wrap. Someone had spray painted 2 floors enough across the Tyvek. It was amateur red spray paint, sloppy, but it wasn't kids. This was an adult tantrum. I walked the perimeter, checked all cameras. One had been turned, deliberately, carefully, just enough to miss the incident. Someone had been up here. I gave the footage to Mark and called in Aaron to reflag the property line with fresh markers. We added extra cameras, this time locked in steel housings. Greg offered to stay overnight in his trailer if needed. Then came the final straw. A construction hold notice was now posted on the county website, publicly marking my project as under dispute. That's when subcontractors started backing out. One called and said he didn't want to get dragged into politics. It was working. Karen's little crusade, her view corridor cult, her fake community initiative, it was bleeding my timeline, my costs, and my crew's morale. Slowly, like acid. But here's the thing about pushing military men. We don't back down. We entrench. Mark filed a formal injunction challenge, citing forged documents, jurisdictional fraud, and the unlawful halt of a permitted build. Aaron pulled zoning data and found an obscure county code from 1998 that clarified exactly where HOA jurisdiction ended, and it wasn't even close to my ridge. Meanwhile, I started documenting every interaction, every insult, every fake letter, and self-declared initiative, because now it wasn't just about finishing my house. It was about burning their fake rules down, legally, methodically, and publicly. They wanted a war of attrition. I was happy to oblige. By the time Mark got the injunction motion submitted, I was starting to feel like a hostage in my own damn build site. Between the county's hold order, the HOA's psychotic vision statements, and the fact that 3 of my subcontractors had ghosted like I was radioactive, I was burning through my contingency fund faster than a California wildfire. And then came the cherry on top of this bureaucratic shit Sunday. A notice from the county court that a civil suit had been filed against me by Suncrest Ridge Estates, filed by none other than Karen Lancaster herself. Allegations: violation of community aesthetics, deliberate disruption of neighborhood harmony, aggressive behavior, and threats of physical violence. Request for a temporary restraining order. Apparently, I had brandished a weapon and threatened to destroy private property, i.e. her SUV with a crowbar. The only weapon I ever pulled out was sarcasm. Still, the hearing was set for the following week. I told Mark to bring the big binder and the mean tie. Meanwhile, I made sure every camera on my site was online, recording and backed up in the cloud every 10 minutes. If Karen wanted to accuse me of assault, I'd show the judge what really happened. But while I was prepping to nuke her lies in court, another problem reared its head, this time from the inside. Greg, my framer, came to me 2 days before the hearing, looking more pissed than usual. He tossed a printed estimate on my workbench. It was for rework, redoing the third-floor crossbeams. Something had been measured wrong, deliberately. The name on the original calc sheets? Luis. Luis had been on my framing crew for 3 weeks. Quiet guy. Reliable. Or so I thought. Turns out he'd installed support brackets with non-rated lag bolts, then falsified the inspection sheet. The whole thing would have failed the final structural review, and the HOA would have had a field day. Greg only caught it because he was double-checking loads for snow prep. I confronted Luis in front of the trailer, didn't yell, didn't threaten, just asked, why? He didn't answer, just muttered something about not wanting to be involved, and took off. Quit on the spot. That night, I checked the site cams again. And there it was, Luis sneaking into the materials trailer after hours, taking photos of blueprints, sending them off from his phone, and walking out to the same black SUV that had visited my property before, the one with the Suncrest Ridge logo. I couldn't prove money changed hands, but I sure as hell could prove accessory sabotage. Mark was livid. That's corporate espionage, Daniel, not civil. Criminal. We'll add it to the countersuit. So now I had forged documents, site sabotage, fake restraining order claims, and a rogue landscaping cult with binoculars. Game on. The day of the hearing, I wore a clean button-down and brought 2 things, the footage from my motion-activated cameras and a printed statement. Karen, of course, came dressed like she was accepting an HOA Oscar, beige pantsuit, expression like she'd smelled a urinal cake. Her lawyer looked like he practiced courtroom sneering as a hobby. They claimed I had waved a crowbar threateningly at Karen when she visited to deliver a friendly notice, that I had advanced aggressively, that she feared for her safety. She even threw in the words PTSD and hostile male energy. The judge, to his credit, looked skeptical before I even spoke. Mark queued up the video. There was Karen stepping over the property line, ignoring the private property sign flanked by her 2 goons. There was me, standing at least 8 feet away, arms at my sides, calmly saying, "You're trespassing. Leave now, or I'll call the sheriff." There was no crowbar, no aggression, just her flapping her arms and yelling about visual chaos. The courtroom went quiet. The judge turned to Karen's attorney. "Do you have any evidence contradicting this video?" He stammered something about emotional context. Karen didn't say a word. The restraining order denied. The judge then addressed the HOA's broader complaint about the house being visually intrusive. He stated on record that my property is outside the HOA's legal jurisdiction and that aesthetic grievances do not override private landowner rights, unless harm or code violation is proven. Then came the cherry on top. He issued a $2,000 fine against Karen personally for submitting false claims and wasting court resources. She looked like she was trying to swallow a lemon whole. We walked out of the courtroom to a waiting camera crew from the local news. Turns out Mark had tipped them off. I gave a short statement. If you build within the law, no one has the right to harass you. Period. Back at the site, I found a new envelope nailed to my fence post. Suncrest Ridge does not forgive disrespect. Expect further action. I laughed and poured myself a bourbon. Karen had just fired her biggest bullet and hit her own foot. But I knew her type. She wouldn't go quietly. And neither would I. Winning in court felt good for about 48 hours. The crew was back, the framing resumed, and for the first time in weeks, the house felt like it had momentum again. We were sealing the third floor, prepping for window installation, and even managed to pour the slab for the generator platform out back. Hell, I even considered inviting the guys over for whiskey once the roof was on. Then the HOA struck again, but not with lawyers this time, with shrubs. I arrived at the site early Monday morning and thought I'd pulled into the wrong property. A neat little line of evergreen saplings, 12 of them evenly spaced, now stood along the southern edge of my lot, just beyond the orange boundary flags Aaron and I had planted. Each was tied with biodegradable ribbon and had a little laminated placard stabbed into the soil that read, "A gift from the Suncrest Ridge Vision Group, because nature deserves a voice." There was even a fucking bow on one. I didn't even laugh. I just stood there staring, trying to figure out if this was some kind of HOA performance art. Then I saw it. The placement of the saplings wasn't random. They were tall, dense, and growing fast. Once they matured, they'd block my panoramic view of the valley almost entirely, especially from the top floor. It wasn't a gift. It was visual revenge, and they did it on my land. I immediately checked the cameras, but of course, whoever planted them came in from the slope. No camera coverage there yet. Smart. Deliberate. Greg wandered over with his coffee and just muttered, "Jesus. They're landscaping you to death." That afternoon, I drove straight to the county land office. Erin met me there, already ahead of me. She'd checked the local arborist registry. Turns out the Vision Group had hired a landscaping contractor who specializes in restorative ecology buffers. Fancy words for people who dig holes and don't ask questions. She'd already filed a report with the zoning office. This counts as unauthorized land use, she told me. They didn't even apply for an easement. They just planted their manifesto. Mark filed a formal complaint the same day, citing unauthorized use of private land, obstruction of view, relevant under local value preservation codes, and material encroachment. Meanwhile, HOA doubled down with a press release. It popped up on their website the next morning. We are proud to beautify our ridge with environmentally sensitive greenery. As part of our ridge revival plan, these trees will serve as a symbolic and literal buffer against visual pollution. They really said visual pollution. About my house. That was the moment I realized something had changed. They didn't think they'd win in court. They weren't even trying to argue law anymore. They were trying to wear me down, one bureaucratic mosquito bite at a time. So I changed tactics. I told Aaron and Mark we needed to go on offense. Step 1, public pressure. I reached out to a friend of mine, a former Marine-turned-journalist named HOA. He ran a podcast and blog about property rights called Lines in the Dirt. After I sent him the full story, including footage, documents, the faked HOA application, and photos of the tree ambush, he asked one question: how soon can I come film? By Friday, he was on site with 2 DSLRs, a drone, and a voice recorder. We filmed the house, the trees, the signs, the spray paint graffiti, the court documents, all of it. He interviewed Greg, my neighbor down the hill, and even Aaron, who gave the most brutally deadpan summary of the annexation attempt I've ever heard. Koa's episode went live 3 days later under the title, Hostile Takeover When Your Land Isn't Yours Anymore. It exploded. 10,000 views in the first day. County officials started getting emails. HOA's Facebook page shut down commenting. Someone even updated the Google Maps location of Suncrest Ridge with a 1-star review that said, "We'll illegally plant trees on your lawn." But that was just the beginning. Step 2. Financial audit. See, Aaron remembered something while digging through public HOA filings. Suncrest Ridge had rejected an independent audit the year prior at their annual meeting. That's not illegal, but it raised eyebrows. Mark and I filed an anonymous ethics complaint with the state HOA regulatory board, and the Colorado Department of Revenue, suggesting financial mismanagement, kickbacks from contractors, and misuse of community funds for unauthorized projects. 3 weeks later, the board opened an investigation. Subpoenas went out. HOA's treasurer resigned without explanation. Karen posted a frantic video message to her dwindling Vision Group members, saying they were under attack by outsiders who don't value community. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Meanwhile, the county sent notice to remove the illegally planted trees within 15 days or face a daily fine. I hired a landscaping crew to extract the roots and grind the stumps down to sawdust. I left the placards in a neat pile at the foot of Karen's driveway, and just for fun, I installed 2 new cameras facing that direction, solar-powered, motion-triggered, with floodlights. Karen was cornered. Her tactics weren't working anymore. She didn't realize it yet, but the more she escalated, the more I documented. She thought she was pressuring me into compliance. What she didn't know? I was building a case. One root, one lie, one fake shrub at a time. By the time the audit notice hit Suncrest Ridge, I half expected Karen to crawl back into her McMansion, pour herself a triple Chardonnay, and consider early retirement from the dictatorship business. Nope. She doubled down. On a gray Thursday morning, I opened my mailbox to find a thick manila envelope. Return address, Suncrest Ridge Estates Legal Committee. Inside was a new civil lawsuit, freshly filed. This one wasn't from the HOA officially, but from Karen Lancaster as a private citizen. Grounds: emotional distress, defamation of character, intentional infliction of psychological trauma. And my personal favorite, visual assault on the community. She'd even included a color-printed packet titled "The Shadow Over the Ridge: How One Man's Ego Threatens Our Harmony." It had drone photos of my home mid-construction, framed to look monstrous. Black and white filters, red arrows pointing to the 3rd floor with dramatic captions like "non-compliant elevation." You'd think I was building a death ray, but she wasn't done. The lawsuit also claimed I had been harassing her, physically intimidating her on multiple occasions, and, brace yourself, had allegedly swung a crowbar near her car during our first encounter. She even requested a new restraining order, citing escalating aggression. Same lie, different wrapper. Mark reviewed the documents with a smirk, then turned serious. She's trying to reframe this as personal. Not HOA versus landowner, but crazy builder versus scared widow. I reminded him she was married. He shrugged. Doesn't matter. Optics. The court granted a preliminary hearing. Meanwhile, Karen used the lawsuit to send out another HOA newsletter, because of course she did. Suncrest Ridge stands strong. We will not be bullied into silence by outsiders who disrespect our values. Funny, considering I literally lived above them. But it got worse. One of the builders on my crew, Jeremy, a drywall guy I'd hired through a subcontractor, quit mid-job. He told Greg someone had approached him at the gas station and offered him money for a statement about me being abusive on site. He didn't take the bait. But it meant only one thing. Karen wasn't just lying in court, she was trying to recruit backup. It was time to play offense again. I called Koa, my podcasting ex-Marine friend, and gave him an idea. What if we flipped the camera around? Show them what the HOA's actually been doing. Spying, trespassing, forging, threatening workers. 2 days later, he dropped part 2 of the story. Manufactured outrage, the HOA that cried wolf. This time, we included never-before-seen security, footage of Karen snooping around my property with a tape measure. One clip even showed her kneeling at my boundary line, digging with a garden spade, planting something. We slowed it down, zoomed in. She was putting in a plastic stake with reflective tape, exactly where the HOA had claimed boundary overlap in their complaint. Fabricated evidence, caught in 4K. The video hit 25,000 views in 72 hours. I sent a link to Mark. He laughed, then emailed the judge. Meanwhile, Erin pulled a rabbit out of her GIS hat. She found archived parcel maps showing Karen had tried something very similar with a lot across the ridge 5 years ago. The owner back then? Elderly, non-confrontational, sold the land at a discount after a long zoning dispute. This wasn't a grudge. It was a pattern. Mark filed a new motion, attempted fraudulent annexation, document tampering, and libel. And just to twist the knife, we added a complaint to the county prosecutor's office requesting a review of the original forged HOA expansion papers. Things moved fast after that. The court ordered a handwriting expert to analyze the supposed signature on the original annexation form. The result, almost 100% probability of forgery. Karen's defense: the form must have been submitted in error. Sure, Karen. The HOA elves did it. The judge didn't buy it. The annexation was officially nullified, struck from the record, and my land restored, on paper and in reality, to fully autonomous HOA-free status. I framed that order and hung it in the construction trailer. Karen's second restraining order request. Denied. Again. The judge even warned her attorney that continued evidentiary manipulation would result in sanctions. That night, I walked out to the edge of my third-floor balcony, sipped a bourbon, and looked down at the HOA lights flickering below, like the last embers of a dying campfire. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Karen had spent months harassing, trespassing, sabotaging, and forging legal documents. She'd tried to hijack my land, ruin my project, and damage my name. Now it was my turn to drag her into court, not as a victim, but as a criminal. I wasn't building a house anymore. I was building a case that could end her career, her HOA, and her entire damn empire of overreach. And she gave me every brick of it herself. I used to think people like Karen only existed in petty email chains and unhinged Facebook threads, the kind that rage about mailbox heights and holiday wreaths being non-compliant with community decorum. But standing in a courthouse lobby, reviewing a draft of a criminal complaint for forgery, fraud, and trespassing, I realized something. Worse, Karen was real, and she'd gotten away with this kind of crap before. Not this time. Mark and I filed 3 separate actions that week. The first, a criminal complaint with the county district attorney attaching the forensic handwriting report, sworn affidavits from Aaron, footage of Karen digging on my property, and the original annexation form showing my signature. The second, a civil suit for attempted fraudulent incorporation of private land into an HOA without consent. The third, a defamation and harassment suit with video evidence, witness statements, and media fallout to back it up. Karen didn't respond at first. Instead, she got quieter. That was the most unnerving part. No letters, no newsletters, no flyers duct taped to my gatepost. Then it broke. A week later, local Channel 7 News ran an expose based on HOA's footage and the documents we released to the press. It ran during the 6 o'clock broadcast. Power, Property, and Fraud, a homeowner's fight against HOA overreach. It was Karen's face, in full HD, walking across my property line, planting stakes, smiling like she was saving the environment, while committing a felony. And then came the hammer. The Colorado Department of HOA Oversight, after receiving multiple complaints, initiated a full audit of Suncrest Ridge Estates. They uncovered enough inconsistencies in financial filings, invoices, and project expenses to raise red flags even from outer space. Turns out Karen had used HOA funds for private landscaping on her own property, beautification incentives that were never approved by vote, payments to contractors affiliated with her cousin's company, legal fees for cases the HOA had no standing to bring. The HOA board started imploding from within. The treasurer resigned again. The vice president gave an interview anonymously to the local paper stating Karen treated the HOA like her private kingdom. Most of us didn't even know about half the things she did. 3 homeowners from Suncrest Ridge reached out to me directly. One brought a USB stick with internal emails, clearly showing Karen instructing a board member to quietly prepare annexation drafts for lots beyond HOA limits without contacting the owners. We added it to our case file. A county judge approved a motion to compel HOA to submit all communications and financial records from the past 2 years. The HOA lawyer? He quit 2 days later. And just when I thought it couldn't go deeper, Erin called. "You're going to want to see this," she said. She sent over a cached version of a now-deleted webpage from a land management firm that had been quietly working with Suncrest Ridge on expansion modeling. The document outlined a phase-based acquisition plan for surrounding lots above the tree, listing owners by name, including mine marked as pending integration. There it was. Black and white. HOA-led land grab disguised as visual corridor preservation. Mark sent the file straight to the district attorney. Karen was subpoenaed to appear for questioning under oath. At the hearing, she came in without her signature beige suit. This time, she looked like someone who knew the air was running out. She tried to explain the forged documents away as administrative confusion, blamed an overzealous volunteer for planting the trees, claimed she was misled by others about boundaries. But under questioning, she slipped. Mark asked plainly, "Did you believe Mr. Vaughn's land was legally part of the HOA?" She answered, "Not officially, but we had an obligation to protect the community's visual integrity." That was it. That was the admission. Not law, not code, just her belief, her opinion, used as the justification for a months-long campaign of harassment, forgery, and sabotage. The district attorney's office announced they would be filing charges for forgery of legal documents, filing fraudulent records with a government office, criminal trespass, harassment, and misuse of HOA authority. Karen was formally charged, released on bond. Her mugshot made it to the local papers, and someone pasted it onto my job site trailer with the caption, "Vision denied." At the emergency HOA meeting called by the remaining board members, the county official overseeing HOA regulation delivered the final nail. Due to ongoing investigations, all Suncrest Ridge Governance Authority is hereby suspended. Interim management will be appointed by the county pending restructuring or dissolution. The look on Karen's face, caught in a blurry photo someone uploaded to Reddit, wasn't anger. It was defeat. I drove back to my site in silence that night, parked the truck, and looked at the dark line of mountain ridges behind the house. The wind was picking up. Snow clouds were crawling in. But I felt something I hadn't felt since I laid the first beam. Peace. But I wasn't done yet. I had one last thing to build. It was a clear morning the day Karen was sentenced. The kind of Colorado clarity where the air smells like pine and cold granite, and even the sun feels like it's watching everything. I stood outside the courthouse in my usual uniform, flannel boots, coffee in one hand, court papers in the other, and waited for the system to finally close the book. Karen Lancaster had pled guilty to 1 count of forging a government document, 2 counts of filing false claims, and misuse of community authority for personal gain. Her lawyers fought for community service and a public apology. The DA laughed. The judge didn't. She was sentenced to 2.5 years probation, 120 hours of community service, and ordered to pay a total of $150,000 in civil restitution and damages to me. Personally, I didn't blink when the verdict came down. I didn't smile. I just watched her shrink in her seat. No pantsuit, no clipboard, just a woman who bet on control and lost to reality. But that wasn't the biggest moment that day. The bigger one came 48 hours later when the county posted an official order to dissolve the Suncrest Ridge Estates HOA board, citing malfeasance, systemic fraud, and demonstrated incapacity for lawful governance. They'd appoint temporary management to protect the neighborhood's basic maintenance needs, but Karen was done. Her rule was over. I installed a new steel gate at the bottom of my access road the next morning. I had it custom engraved. Private property, outside HOA jurisdiction, trespassers will be prosecuted. Yes, we're serious. Right next to it, under a clear acrylic frame, I mounted a certified copy of the court order. Then we got back to work. By early spring, the house was done. 3 full levels, glass walls, solar arrays, high-efficiency heating, and a wraparound balcony that made every sunrise feel like a cathedral. The build had cost more than planned, thanks to Karen's delays and sabotage, but I didn't care, because I didn't just build a house. I built proof that these people, the petty tyrants in khakis and board meetings, don't always win. Not when you fight smart, not when you don't flinch. People started reaching out after the news broke, dozens of them. Some from Colorado, others from Arizona, California, Texas, every one of them with a story about overreaching HOAs, forged fines, fabricated rules, and power-mad board members ruining their lives. So I built something else, a website, a forum, a database of cases, tools, and legal resources. I called it Freehold Defense, a hub for anyone being steamrolled by their HOA, their board, or their neighbor with too much time and too little conscience. I didn't expect it to blow up, but it did. I started getting invitations to podcasts, panel discussions, even a regional real estate law summit. Apparently, being the guy who took down the HOA Queen of the Rockies makes you a folk hero in some circles. I went on one talk show in Denver. The host asked me what I would have done differently. I said, maybe built the roof first. Everything else? Worth it. As for Karen, she sold her house 3 weeks after sentencing. Quietly. No farewell newsletter. Word is she moved to New Mexico, somewhere with no elevation, probably no neighbors either. Good. The ridge was quiet again. My cameras stopped picking up unwanted visitors. My crew came by once in a while for barbecue. Aaron still sends me GIS jokes. Koa's working on a documentary. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on that third-floor balcony, the one she said I'd never build, and look out over the valley. It's beautiful, untouched, mine.